A spotlight hits the stage. A tenor's voice echoes through the grand hall. But in the shadows, a letter arrives at his door. Pay us, or we'll destroy your voice forever. This isn't a scene from a movie. It's the chilling reality of the world's first recording star, Enrico Caruso. And his story is just the beginning of a century-long nightmare, where music, opera, and ballet weren't just about art, but about crime, power, and blood. Enrico Caruso was the voice of an era, a poor boy from Naples who rose to become the Metropolitan, opera's shining star in early 1900s New York. His voice sold millions of records worldwide, making him the world's first true musical superstar. He lived in luxury, adored by audiences everywhere. But behind that fame lurked a shadow. In 1904, Caruso began receiving letters at his elegant New York townhouse. The messages were chilling: threats to kidnap his family, destroy his face, and even poison his voice with lies slipped into his tea. The letters were signed by the Black Hand, a ruthless extortion ring terrorizing immigrants in major U.S. cities. At first, Caruso paid. He handed over stacks of cash, hoping they'd leave him alone. But like feeding a monster, the more he gave, the hungrier they became. Soon he was trapped, a prisoner of his own fame. By 1910, Caruso couldn't take it anymore. He turned to the NYPD, who launched a risky sting operation. Detectives posed as intermediaries, luring the gangsters into a trap. 2 members were arrested, but the victory was hollow. Caruso's life was forever changed. He would never again appear in public without a bodyguard. Haunted by the knowledge that the Black Hand could strike at any moment, Caruso's ordeal was only the tip of the iceberg. Across America, mobsters presented themselves as patrons of the arts. They managed clubs where jazz legends like Louis Armstrong performed. They offered protection to cooners like Bing Crosby. But that protection came at a cost. Contracts were signed in blood, not ink. Some artists even welcomed the mob, mistaking its brutality for opportunity. But in this world, favors always came with chains attached. Over time, the connections became undeniable. The Genovese crime family secretly owned entire record labels. Ballet companies like Moscow's Bolshoi were engulfed in bribery and violence. In 2013, the acid attack on Bolshoi's artistic director Sergei Fellin exposed the venomous rivalries behind the graceful facade of ballet. And in Paris, history revealed that the Paris Opera Ballet once operated like a high-class brothel for its patrons. A tradition of exploitation stretching back centuries. The pattern was clear. Art, when starved of funding, became a feast for predators. And those who made deals with criminals, from Caruso to modern-day opera stars linked to trafficking scandals, learned the same cruel lesson. Once you invite darkness in, it never truly leaves. Today, the ties between organized crime and the sea, arts are quieter, but not gone. The allure of glamour still hides corruption, and behind every standing ovation, there may still be a hand reaching from the shadows. Because in the performing arts, as history has shown, the most beautiful stages can hide the darkest secrets. Generosa's childhood was anything but stable. Mary continued to bring men into the home while neglecting her children. Some accounts suggest troubling behavior from these partners, though whether Mary knew or cared remains unclear. The children were never her priority. Growing up in this chaos, Generosa learned independence early. She carried within her the resilience born of hardship and the artistic spark inherited from her mother's family. Those traits, combined with beauty and charisma, would later shape her stormy but glamorous life with Ted Ammon. At just 10 years, old Generosa lost her mother to cancer. The death was devastating. Her older siblings soon pursued their own paths, leaving Generosa and a younger sister to live with an uncle before being passed among relatives. The absence of a mother left a deep imprint, shaping both her resilience and her fierce ambition. She matured into a strong-willed, intelligent young woman, often compared to her mother for her fiery temperament and unpredictability. Determined not just to survive but to rise, she pursued both wealth and artistic recognition. Friends described her as magnetic but demanding, capable of charm and ruthlessness in equal measure. After school, Generosa moved to New York City to chase her dream of becoming an artist. To support herself, she worked in real estate, a cutthroat profession where confidence and quick instincts were essential. Despite fierce competition, she held her ground. Her determination and charisma soon gave her a foothold in the market. Even after marrying Ted Ammon, whose wealth could have freed her from work, she pushed forward with her creative passions. Ted supported her efforts, funding a photography studio where she could explore her artistic side. Together, they became part of New York's cultural and social circles, hosting gatherings that often seemed as much about status as companionship. Eventually, the couple turned to family life. Conceiving proved difficult, and in 1992, they chose adoption. They traveled to Ukraine and brought home 2-year-old twins, Greg and Alexa. By then, Ted's fortune exceeded $50 million, and the family lived in comfort on an expansive East Hampton estate they had built together. Outwardly, it looked perfect. In reality, conflict was constant. Generosa's temper was volatile. She could be sarcastic, cutting, and quick to anger. Early in their marriage, Ted had managed her outbursts with patience, but over time the strain became heavy. She taunted him by comparing him to wealthier men and dismissed his suggestion of therapy. Her jealousy grew obsessive. She monitored Ted's movements, read his correspondence, checked his phone, and reacted explosively at any suspicion of infidelity. By the late 1990s, Ted confided to friends and family that he was considering divorce. In 1999, the couple moved to Surrey, England, purchasing a manor called Coverwood in hopes of a fresh start. Generosa poured herself into redesigning the property, while Ted commuted weekly to New York to manage his business ventures. The distance between them only deepened. When Generosa discovered a lawyer's invoice on Ted's desk, she became convinced he was preparing to leave her for another woman. She hired private investigators and later claimed he was involved with a glamorous New York banker, even alleging the woman had borne his child, an accusation never proven. By 2000, Generosa filed for divorce. She demanded half of Ted's estimated $300 million fortune, though his true assets were closer to $100 million. The case quickly turned bitter. Returning to New York with the twins, she made visitation difficult and reportedly turned the children against their father. The battle dragged on, with Generosa challenging every figure and accusing Ted of hiding wealth. Despite her claims, she was far from destitute. Ted provided a Manhattan townhouse for her to renovate and paid significant support. But in her eyes, it was never enough. During the townhouse renovation, Generosa met Daniel Pelosi, a contractor hired for electrical and handyman work. At 38, he was 7 years her junior, and far from the polished circles Ted inhabited. Ted despised him from the start, not only because Pelosi spent time with the twins, but because he sensed danger. His concerns were valid. Daniel had a history of assault charges, utility theft worth tens of thousands, and multiple harassment allegations. He had been arrested for drunk driving, struggled with alcohol and prescription pills, and his addictions had destroyed his first marriage. With 3 children of his own and a divorce underway, Daniel appeared intent on securing his future by attaching himself to someone wealthy. Generosa, aware of Ted's contempt, flaunted the relationship. She seemed to relish how much it angered her estranged husband. Ted worried most about the children. He saw Daniel driving a Porsche, living in the townhouse he had paid for, and feared his influence on Greg and Alexa. His attempts to reason with Generosa failed. To the twins, Pelosi was tolerable, even likable. But their mother's growing manipulation widened the rift between them and their father. With few options left, Ted used the only leverage he had: money. He withheld child support, reversed earlier property concessions, and revealed that his true fortune was closer to $30 million, not the $100 million or $300 million Generosa had claimed. Still, her demands persisted. She insisted Ted cover not only child support, but every expense tied to the children, including private school, household costs, and a nanny. When the divorce settlement was drafted, she stood to receive between $20 and $25 million plus $21,000 a month in support. Yet even that did not satisfy her. Before the settlement could be finalized, tragedy struck. On October 20th, 2001, Ted Ammon, age 52, was found murdered in his East Hampton mansion. His chauffeur and business partner discovered the body. Ted lay naked on his bed, his skull fractured by multiple blows. The alarm system had been disabled. There was no forced entry, pointing to someone who knew the home well. The investigation turned quickly toward Generosa. She had inherited his $97 million estate, and just 3 months later married Daniel Pelosi. Motive was clear. Witnesses recalled her openly saying Ted deserved to die. Still, she had an alibi. The brutality of the crime suggested a strong hand. Someone like Daniel's testimony soon surfaced. Construction workers said Generosa had offered $50,000 to have Ted beaten. Christopher Perino, an acquaintance of Daniel, testified that on the night of the murder he drove Pelosi to Ted's house. Daniel told him to wait outside, and when he returned he was smeared with blood, muttering, "I think he's dead." Others recalled Pelosi bragging that he killed Ted at Generosa's urging. Even his father admitted Daniel once asked how to dispose of evidence. Yet, despite the accounts, no physical evidence linked him to the murder. The case rested largely on witness testimony. By then, Generosa faced a battle of her own. She had been diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. She accused Ted of indirectly causing her illness, claiming he had known of a lump years earlier, but failed to tell her. Psychological evaluations painted her as volatile, with traits of borderline, narcissistic, and paranoid personality disorders. In 2003, prosecutors offered her immunity in exchange for grand jury testimony. She refused, insisting Daniel had no role in Ted's death. On May 20th, 2003, she died at her East Hampton home. In her final months, Generosa turned against Pelosi. His reckless spending had repelled her. Though they married in January 2002, by July 2003 she forced him to sign a post-nuptial agreement. $2 million in exchange for not contesting her will. She later revised the will to ensure he received only that amount, leaving the rest to her children and their nanny, appointed guardian of Greg and Alexa. Daniel challenged the deal but lost. By 2004, Pelosi was on trial for murder. He admitted being at the Ammon home the night of the killing but denied striking Ted, instead blaming Generosa for orchestrating the crime. Jurors heard repeated testimony, however, of him boasting about the murder. On January 25, 2005, Daniel Pelosi was convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life. Generosa had died 2 years earlier, never formally charged, but forever linked to the crime that tore the Ammon family apart. Custody of Greg and Alexa went to Ted's sister, Sandra Williams, who vowed to provide the stable, loving home her brother had wanted. Years later, in 2012, the twins, by then young adults, co-produced 59 Middle Lane, a documentary named after the house where their father was killed. In it, they revisited their Ukrainian roots and confronted the shadows of their childhood. Today, both are in their 30s. Greg pursued filmmaking, while Alexa has chosen a more private life. They remember their father as kind, generous, and the steady anchor of their youth. Their memories of their mother remain conflicted, a mix of admiration for her intelligence and recognition of the chaos that followed when Daniel Pelosi entered her life. Despite the tragedy, the siblings have carried forward their father's legacy, building stability in the aftermath of loss.